Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather and we are in a kind of unfamiliar space on our farm. This is where the magic happens. This is where I edit my videos. And this year, this is where I'm planting my garden. So I have a couple different resources that I like to use when it comes to garden planting. And absolutely the most valuable resource that I have is past experience. So this will be our 5th summer growing at this homestead. And over the years, we have absolutely gained a lot of knowledge that you just can't get if you don't just experience it, if you don't just do and get your hands in the dirt. I can remember my first year gardening was summer of 2019, and one of the things that we really like to eat here is cruciferous vegetables, so things like cauliflower and broccoli. And at the time, I was so eager to grow a garden and so ready to just harvest all the food that I didn't realize that I couldn't grow those kinds of things in the summer. So I actually did plan and plant brassicas in the middle of summer, and of course that didn't work. I didn't know that at the time. And now I do. And I learned that through experience. I was trying to figure out exactly why my plants didn't work. And I did learn over time through some research, but that's why I really like what I'm going to be able to show you today. I think some of those things are good to kind of learn hands-on, but some of that stuff doesn't have to be learned the hard way. So what I'm working with today is actually the Hortisketch garden planner. I have really been enjoying this thing. And guys, I'm not super tech savvy, so don't think that you have to be super tech savvy in order to use something like this. This has been very, very intuitive and I have appreciated it a whole lot. I may or may not have mentioned it before, but I used to garden plan on some graph paper inside a book. And I wanted to show you some of my past garden plans that I made in that book, but I don't know where it went. And that's what's kind of nice about being able to plan the garden out on the computer is this is all saved to a cloud, and I don't even have to remember to hit a save button. If I just X out of the computer, everything saves. If we lose power like we do all the time, everything is going to save and I'm not going to lose my plan. So as we can see here, you guys may or may not recognize this space. This is our raised bed garden, and over here we have the kids' garden, and we haven't exactly gotten to planning that out yet. But I've generally got the garden mapped out as I plan to grow it. So right now I already have lots of garlic planted. There is some oregano over here in the garden, and I do have my asparagus and rhubarb crowns and the strawberries already in the ground. So this just kind of acts as a placeholder for those things so that I know and remember that those things are there, because things like asparagus crowns, they remain dormant under the ground during the winter, and having them here makes me remember exactly where they are. When they come up in the springtime and they're there over the summer, I definitely won't forget where they are, but it's really nice to have that placeholder here in the meantime. So this here is a rough idea of what I hope the garden is going to look like. So it is very true that you don't necessarily grow tomatoes at the same season that you grow things like cabbage. I have them here in the same spot at the same time because there is a little bit of overlap of those crops in our area. So I will have the tomatoes in the ground. They won't be fruiting in June, but that's when my cabbage is going to be coming to fruition. So I need to consider them in the same space because they will be occupying the same space through some of the same time. Actually, right here I'm in planning mode right now, and if I move this over to live mode, most of the stuff just kind of disappears. But don't worry, it is not gone. So if I click back to planning mode, all of my hard work is still there. But what live mode does, it just gives you an example of what's going to happen right now. So up here we can see we've got a little bit of a calendar, and it says right now we should have our blackberries and our strawberries in the garden, and we do. What this doesn't know is that I have the rhubarb crowns and asparagus crowns in the garden already from the past year, so it doesn't show those here, but those are in the garden over there. And as we move through the months, you can see that certain things start to appear. So right now they're working on making sure that new gardeners realize that just because your tomato comes up on your plan in February doesn't mean that it can go out in the garden in February. So here in my growing zone, I do start my tomatoes in February, but I don't start them out in the garden. So if we click the growing calendar for February and head down to our tomatoes, we can see them here. We can sow them in February, but we really shouldn't put them out into the garden until May. So it's really important to note that. And it's super useful to have all of this information at my fingertips. So another little tool that I really like to use when I'm planning my garden is a Clyde's Garden Planner. And this growing calendar here kind of replaces that. So if I happen to lose my Clyde's Garden Planner, I won't lose track of what I need to plant when, and I don't necessarily have to have all of the seed packets in front of me to understand exactly what I'm doing or to remember exactly when I'm supposed to start what. So we zoom back out a little bit. This whole program is pretty cool. It's not necessarily just for gardeners, though it's pretty much targeted at somebody who is going to grow a garden, but you can also use it to plan your homestead. So this is what I call our house lot on our land. And so we've got our house here, we've got a big tree in the front yard, and they didn't have an icon for elderberries, but I used the mulberry icon and stuck those over here. One of the things that I've really enjoyed while I've been working pretty closely with the Garden Savvy team is you can actually email them for suggestions of new icons. So probably right after I close out this video, I'm going to email John and say, hey, do you think you can add an elderberry icon? And then in no time flat, there should be an elderberry icon available to everyone who's using the app. They also are starting to add some pretty cool little features that allow you to kind of plan and plot out your homestead. So if you are just now getting into homesteading and you're maybe wanting to add some chickens or some goats and you really want to plan out your land, you can absolutely do that. So as you can see here, we have our, what I called our house lot earlier. Not very far over here actually is our chicken coop. So I didn't set this plot out large enough to include it, but if I wanted to, I could head over to the structures tab over here and click on the chicken coop and put it right in here. And then if we wanted to add in some fencing, we could do that. Slide the fence on over. And then suddenly there's a chicken coop in the backyard. So this is really cool, not just for the gardener, but for the homesteader. So if we come over to my plans, I actually have made a plan for behind the courtyard, as I call it, or the greenhouse area. So I designated this as larger than just the greenhouse because I do have that 100-foot lane that I'm gonna plant. I talked about a couple videos ago. And it's really crazy seeing it from this bird's eye view. It makes the greenhouse look so itty bitty. But if I zoom in, we can see exactly the plan of what's going on inside of the greenhouse. So I've got everything laid out here. Here's our seating area. This is where my green stock tower is. And then our little mini greenhouses that we have inside the big greenhouses and the table over here. So I have 6 different rows inside of the greenhouse. And this is the general rough plan of what I plan to put in the greenhouse. So you get a little bit of a sneak peek today. So again, we're in planning mode. And if I move this up to live mode, it looks like we could be starting some zinnia from seed, which I honestly didn't realize that I could start zinnia from seed this early, but it looks like you can. And then if we move on to February, again, we get our tomatoes coming up. They need to be started indoors in February and not necessarily out in the greenhouse. March, many more things come on. Isn't this cool? And then in April, past our last frost date, which is in the middle of April, I'm able to put in the beans. And up here in what I am lovingly calling the lane in between our chicken run and the goat pasture in the back, I have different pumpkins that I plan to grow here. I'm going to grow a couple different varieties of cucumbers, different types of melons, and I'm going to grow a squash variety on the end here. So one of the criticisms that I do have about this program is that I can't exactly define what varieties of what I am planting. So if we come back to the raised bed garden, I've got some tomatoes here and I've got some tomatoes in the greenhouse. I do have some peppers over here and I've got some peppers that I'm planted in the greenhouse, but I've got a wide variety of both of those things. And I really wish that there was a way for me to hover over the icon or click on the icon and designate what variety is planted where. There is a notes section over here and I can add a note and say, So I can designate what variety in this way. I just kind of wish that it was all on this visual part here. So the planning part, the mapping out of the garden, isn't the only thing that comes with this Hortisketch program. There's a really valuable add-on that comes with called Garden Manager, and that is over here. And the Garden Manager has so much value on its own. And if you really prefer making your garden plans with paper and pencil, by all means, I still think the Garden Manager part of it, which does have a separate charge, if you'd rather just have the Garden Manager, you can absolutely do that. But this is where you can organize all of your garden stuff as far as your suppliers for seeds, where you like to shop for maybe your greenhouse supplies. You can put in your local places that you like to buy seeds and gardening equipment. All of your contacts, it's basically a virtual contact list. And there's also a place for a seed inventory on here. So everything that requires a little bit of organization stays here all in one place. And there's so much value in that, because sometimes I forget where I buy things. I'm actually gonna haul out my big old seed binder right now, because there's a couple different seed suppliers that I've purchased from the past that I wanna make sure I input in here so I don't forget that they exist. Sometimes there's so many different suppliers in this binder that I just can't remember them all if I don't see them really frequently. So Tromboncino squash, I bought those from a Maine-owned company called Pine Tree Garden Seeds. See, I forgot all about these guys until I was just now talking to you guys about them. So I can come over here into the Garden Manager and go to My Suppliers, Seed Suppliers, and I can add in Pine Tree Garden Seeds. Down here. And then when I want to access Pine Tree Garden Seeds, I can just come to my folder here, click it right there. And then over here we see View Website. I'm gonna click their website, and then I can browse and shop to my heart's content. I really like having everything bookmarked here on the Garden Manager. So it's not just about seed organization or organizing your different suppliers for like greenhouse supplies and all that. You can actually use this as a learning tool out in the field. So the Garden Manager part of the whole package is mobile, and you can access this while you're out in the garden. So let's say you're out in the greenhouse, you're nowhere near your computer, but you do have your phone on you, and you see some kind of disease coming up on the plant. You can come in on your Garden Manager, access pests and diseases. Earlier in the day I inputted tomatoes here, and I found this scholarly article that was linked here within Garden Manager on the University of Minnesota Extension, and it's everything we really need to know about growing tomatoes. I can click this disease tab here and find different diseases and examples of what those look like while I'm out in the garden and looking at things, and I can basically diagnose my plant right out in the field. This is so valuable. Going back to the seed inventory here for just a second, there's more to it than just noting down what you have. There's actually sections where you can put in pictures of what it looked like, what the plant looked like when you grew it. And you can also add in the comments section things that you noticed during the growing season that you might forget by the time the next growing season starts. So over here under strawberry tomato, I can tell where I bought it. So if I need to reorder it, I can do so at the click of a button. But also I remembered that they were delicious, but they were really prone to disease. And all of this is really important to remember when I'm planning next year's garden. And if I had a picture of the disease or a picture of how beautifully they grew for me, I could click the image button here and input that and be able to access that later, like for next year's garden. And believe it or not, there's a third aspect to all of this garden planning awesomeness, and I think that this is really the cherry on top. I really think that this takes Garden Savvy's community to a different level, because it actually does contain a real community tab. So it's a lot like Facebook, but for gardeners. So here is the free community on Garden Savvy. The news feed here is full of different photos and encouragements from other gardeners from around the world. There are some people here that are gardening in the southern hemisphere, and so we've got pictures of tomatoes and gorgeous fruits that everybody is showing off, and it's all really lovely and really encouraging to see. And if you have a question, you can post it and get comments and input from around the world, pretty much like any other social media, but this is garden centric. And on here too, we actually have our own little garden group. It is called Sage and Stone Garden Hub, and right now it only has 16 members, but you know what? It's a start. You can see here a little bit of a sneak peek of what we've been chatting about lately. And again, the community here is free, and so I really think that all aspiring gardeners or experienced gardeners, anybody who really wants to gain more of that community, really should be hopping on here. So it is my recommendation that you go for the full premium membership. What that gets you is all of the Hortisketch garden planning tools, plus the garden manager, and of course the community is always free. There's a 7-day money back guarantee on all of this, so you get to try it out for a full week. And if you decide it's not right for you, you can get a full refund, no questions asked. A week is a really long time to be able to play around with this and see what you think, and I think you're gonna love it. And don't forget, you can actually use my coupon code SageStone5 to get $5 off, and it brings that low price even lower. And really, when I think about it, the value in that is actually quite large. I've got a lot of apps on my phone that cost a lot more than that, that offer a lot less. And you get all of these new updates and new icons and new information that comes into the community. You have access to all of that year round, and it's updated quite often. So I'll be getting into all of the nitty-gritty of exactly which varieties of all of the different things that I'm going to be planting pretty soon here once my seed order arrives. I just ordered another batch of seeds, even though you saw my big giant binder. I probably didn't need more, and I've got some awesome varieties that I can't wait to show you, and I'm even more excited to plant.